I'm live on YouTube. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. All right, so let's see. Experience theory, introduction. Let's just start in the very beginning. I feel like the first 5 chapters are pretty much perfect now, but we'll see. Okay, it starts like this. As we live our lives, we experience collections of visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory, olfactory, vestibular, and proprioceptive sensations. Just listing all the different types. I actually don't know. How do you pronounce gustatory? Is it gustatory or gusta? Because that's the taste. Pronunciation. Gustatory. No, don't do that. Play it. Gustatory. Okay, I thought so. Gustatory, olfactory, vestibular, balance and spatial orientation, and proprioceptive, which is body position and movement sensations. Okay, yeah, so as we live our lives, we experience collections of sensations. From our perspective as human beings, these sensations make up 100% of our lives. However, our scientific understanding of the world is often interpreted to say that atoms and subatomic particles let's abbreviate that. We're constructed from are inanimate objects. However, our scientific understanding of the world is often interpreted to say the atoms and subatomic particles we're constructed from are inanimate objects. Let's define some terms. So then I define inanimate object, experience, consciousness, conscious, and unconscious. Okay, the idea that everything in our world is built from little inanimate objects may seem fine on first inspection. However, the first-person experience we all have is an entirely different type of entity from physical material. How are we conscious if we're made of unconscious matter? Is it really possible for inanimate objects to interact in such a way that generates conscious experience? As humanity makes progress in science and philosophy, we're getting closer to understanding how everything works, but we still don't have a satisfying answer to this. Philosophers have begun referring to this as the hard problem of consciousness. It's difficult for us to answer because we don't have a complete theory of everything. We have an excellent understanding of how the physical world operates, but we don't know why the physical world operates the way it does, or how conscious people fit into the picture. Okay, that's right. This is feeling good so far. Like, I just need to read it out loud, I think, because otherwise I'm just reading it in my head, and sometimes I don't catch when things sound weird. So, okay, I like that so far. In engineering, we make the assumption that objects in the universe objectively exist and change according to some laws of physics. However, the engineer's model of the universe doesn't offer an explanation for conscious experience, which is in truth the only thing anyone has ever actually experienced. Have you experienced anything other than your experience? One might think, I can imagine things that aren't a part of my experience, but that's still an experience of imagining things that aren't in your experience. Everything that any human has ever experienced or imagined falls in the category of an experience. Because the way I defined it was up here, a collection of sensations including but not limited to vision, sound, touch, taste, smell, pain, pleasure, feelings, thought processes, spatial orientation, and movement. So, yeah, anything you could possibly experience would be an experience, of course. And that's the thing that I'm trying to argue in the book, basically, is like, because I know people would say, well, what about an object like a rock? That's not an experience, it's a rock. But we only know about rocks because we experience them, because we see them in our experiences. So it could turn out that rocks have experiences too. That might sound far-fetched, but we'll get there later. We know rocks are made of atoms, and we don't know what atoms are. So each atom could be conscious, and so that rock could be a collection of conscious experiences. So it's beside the point. The point is, from your own human perspective, everything you've ever experienced is an experience, and everything you know of is an experience of you knowing of it. So even the rock, all you really know is you've had an experience of seeing a rock. So even though the rock is an object, ultimately, it's just an experience of seeing a rock. That's kind of my point there. Okay. Everything that any human has ever experienced or imagined falls in the category of an experience. Okay, we typically think of subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules as physical objects with 3 spatial coordinates, x, y, z, and 1 temporal. Is it temporal or temporal? Temporal. Well, you don't even pronounce the O. Temporal. Rickroll. Temporal. Okay. 3 spatial coordinates and 1 temporal coordinate t. In a 4-dimensional space-time grid, and okay, we typically think of it like that, and we use this to produce excellent working theories for engineering and technology. However, grids and coordinates are human-made tools for measuring and analysis, and they don't necessarily represent the true nature of what we observe. We observe objects changing in consistent patterns, such as force equals mass times acceleration, and there are certain phenomena like gravity that seem to be enforced by laws of the universe. When we analyze the behavior of objects, notice patterns, and create mathematical equations to describe and predict behavior, we are studying physics. Let's say we're studying physics. Physics is the study of the behavior of everything. Okay? We have learned to predict what subatomic particles and atoms will do, but we still don't know what subatomic particles and atoms are. All we're seeing is how they behave. At some point, we're left scratching our heads asking what would behave like this. We venture into the meta, the big picture, when we ask questions like that. Why do objects follow these laws of physics? What is the true nature of everything? Many philosophers have suggested throughout history that our world could have a dual nature. Maybe there is both a consciousness realm and a physical world connected together. Some have imagined that our conscious experiences are actually illusions, and the engineer's physical worldview can explain everything by itself. Another possibility is that consciousness is fundamental, and the entire universe, which seems physical to us, is something that emerged inside an experience. When we analyze these different worldviews, we're studying metaphysics. All right, cool. I'm going to do one thing real quick. All right, let's keep reading it. Okay, I gotta try to focus, see if I need to change anything here. So many philosophers suggested maybe it's a dual nature, maybe it's idealism, maybe it's physicalism. Okay, a good example of a metaphysical question is, am I dreaming right now? A dream is like a simulation of real life because the same kinds of experiences that happen in real life can happen in dreams. None of the events in a dream are what make it a dream. It's a dream because of the meta-reality, the big picture, that the person is sleeping in the real world and imagining it all. A dream experience has the same experiential nature as a real-life experience, meaning they both involve sensations like vision, sound, and touch, so it can be very difficult to tell the difference while you're fully enveloped in an experience. Whatever would happen in the real world could be dreamed or simulated, so a dream or a simulation could be indistinguishable from real life. Yeah. Because of this, it seems there's no science experiment to determine whether you're dreaming or not. Even if you tried an experiment, it's always possible to dream or simulate the outcome that supposedly proves you aren't dreaming, so it's impossible to be sure. This is why answering questions about metaphysics requires more than scientific data alone. Even with all the scientific data, it will require proper reasoning and interpretation of the data to find the truth. So answering our metaphysical questions requires both science and philosophy. I think that's pretty good. Whatever would happen in the real world could be dreamed, so it could be indistinguishable from real life. I think that's right. I'm trying to think if there's any exception to that. What science experiment could you do to see if you're dreaming? Even if you thought of something super clever, I'm going to check if I can imagine something separate or whatever the outcome is that proves that you're dreaming or proves that you're not dreaming could still be dreamed. That's just how vague experience is. You could experience anything with all kinds of different, because the experience is just the collection of sensations you're experiencing. So when you're dreaming, it's just another collection of experience or another collection of sensations. Yeah, so you wouldn't know whether you're dreaming or not. And there's no science experiment you could do to prove it, because you could always just dream the answer. Makes sense to me. Okay. Some may wonder, why does it matter, or who cares about metaphysics? Some people have a deep driving curiosity to understand everything, so they want to know for fun. But it's not only philosophers having fun. Metaphysics is a foundation for deriving our identity and ethics. Our understanding of what life is informs us on who we are and what we should do with our lives. So whether we realize it or not, everything we do is affected by our view of the world and our position in it. I like that. I feel like I could edit that a little bit, though. Because it makes sense just when I was writing that, but when I'm reading it, this is why I need to read it out loud. Because I want it to flow as if I'm just having a conversation. Some may wonder, why does it matter? Who cares about metaphysics? When I'm speaking, I would put the word well there. So I could say, well, some people just have a deep driving curiosity to understand it. But should I put the word well there? No, the word well feels weird. Some people, I feel weird about the way that's worded. Maybe I should say some of us. Some of us have a deep driving curiosity to understand metaphysics. So we want to know for fun. I don't know. I'm just going to make a note that maybe I'm just going to highlight that and maybe work on that later. Okay. So then basically that's the end of the introduction. So now it's time to go into chapter 1. Okay, yeah. So chapter 1, requirements for a complete theory of everything. Physicists are searching for a specific type of theory of everything, which would consist of mathematical equations describing the behavior of everything from large objects down to fundamental particles. If the fundamentals of reality were something physical, such as particles or waves, maybe some equations could describe them. However, we still don't know the nature of objects. Equations can only describe events that follow certain rules, so there is a limit to their application. For example, if the nature of some atomic particles turned out to be subjective experience with some form of free will, then equations wouldn't be able to fully predict their behavior. Interestingly, that's what we've found so far in quantum mechanics. The behavior of subatomic particles involves some randomness, can't be fully predicted by equations, and can only be described in terms of probabilities. The field of physics has led to a great core theory. What is it? The field of physics has led to a great core theory of how things work in this universe. However, neither classical nor quantum physics tells us exactly how and why a universe with physics like this would exist in the first place. We have the Big Bang Theory, but not an explanation as to why a singularity of physical matter would exist and why it would expand to create a universe. A complete theory of everything should answer these questions too. The idea that everything can be reduced down to some fundamental equations stems from that engineer's worldview. If we are, okay, I'm going to abbreviate that. Is that called abbreviation? I'm going to apostrophe that. If we're searching for, there's worldview. If we're searching more broadly for an answer to metaphysics without assuming that everything is fundamentally physical, then our definition of theory of everything needs to be wider and more encompassing than merely a set of master equations. A theory of everything simply needs to explain everything we experience in our lives, however and whatever that might be. Okay, I like that. I'm basically just saying, because most people, I think, would think of a theory of everything as the thing that physicists are trying to do, which is write a set of master equations. But that's not what I'm going to do in this book. I'm going to basically try to provide a theory of everything that's just an explanation. And my argument is that things don't just follow equations. So that's actually not what we should be looking for in the first place. Okay, I think that's all right. So my definition of a theory of everything is just a theory of metaphysics that explains the nature of everything. Okay. Studying metaphysics may seem difficult because we can't get outside the universe to look back at it from the outside. We have to study the universe while being trapped inside it. That doesn't mean we're out of luck, though. We can define categories of theories of everything and use a process of elimination to narrow our search. One useful tool for narrowing a theory search is called Occam's razor. If there's more than one explanation for something, our working theory should only include that which is necessary to explain the thing we're trying to explain and nothing extra. For example, say we want to know why ice melts. This is kind of a goofy example, but I guess it's good. Theory A says ice melts when the temperature increases above the melting point. Theory B says ice melts when the temperature increases above the melting point and the sky is blue. If Theory A successfully explains the melting of ice in all experiments without the need for the additional condition of the sky color, then Occam's razor shaves off Theory B. Okay. When we design a theory, it's typically going to be based on at least one assumption. Since we don't know if our assumptions are true, each assumption we make is a potential mistake. It's similar to when an engineer designs a piping system, they try to minimize potential leak points by minimizing the number of pipe fittings. We want to minimize assumptions when designing our theory of everything to minimize the potential for mistakes. Okay, yeah, of course. When analyzing different metaphysical worldviews, it's important to remember that scientific facts are based on empirical evidence, so a good theory of metaphysics shouldn't conflict with any scientific facts. Our goal should be to make the best sense we can out of the information we currently have. Someday we may find evidence that conflicts with our working theory, so it should always be open to revision, but until then we can form a temporary theory from the data available. All right. This is kind of like the boring introduction. A postulate is an assumption. Okay, I feel like this is fine. To build a logical argument, we need base axioms. Our first postulate will define our standard for a complete theory of everything. We'll make it as simple as possible so that hopefully everyone can agree, and then we'll use the postulate to guide our search for a complete theory of everything. So I'm basically this is chapter 1. I'm just establishing that we want to figure out a complete theory of everything. And to do that, the requirement is that it has to fully explain the existence of human beings, our universe, and all of our scientific data. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a set of equations that describe physics. It can just be an explanation that answers all the questions. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard, but I think that's a key thing to point out. Just because I think that's what a lot of people think of when they're thinking about theory of everything. They start to think about physics and force equals mass times acceleration and quantum mechanics and trying to understand all that. So yeah, I feel like this is pretty good. This first chapter is really short. That's it. This requirement defines what we need to know, the nature of everything. We want our theory of everything to provide a perfectly reasonable, logical, and complete explanation for the origins of everything. Any prerequisites or preconditions must also have their origins fully explained. Because that's the point. When we're trying to make a theory of everything, it's tempting to think you got it by just saying it works a certain way. But for the theory of everything to be actually complete, it has to answer all questions. So, for example, if a theory of everything relies on supernatural forces, or if it just says the laws of physics drive the universe, well, then the origins of those forces or the laws of physics will need to be fully explained. We don't want to answer questions by positing something that itself lacks an explanation. Because I think that's the most common thing that we try to do is people try to say the laws of physics are the explanation of the universe. But there's still an open question. Well, why is there a universe that follows these laws of physics? So if you want a complete theory of everything, you have to have an answer to that too. It can't just be like, well, things just follow laws of physics. Trust me. And that's what makes it so hard. How are you possibly going to answer that? Well, I don't know, but that's what this book is talking about. So let's see. Blah, 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 blah. That's basically that. Now that we've established a framework, we can seek out a theory of everything that meets our requirements. Okay. Chapter 2, the mind-body problem. We experience our lives. We experience our lives through feelings and sensations such as visions and sounds, but at the same time, we're housed in these physical bodies, locked in the gears of a physical world with other people. This is mind and body. Much of the difficulty with explaining this experience is figuring out which aspects fundamentally exist and which are emergent. In this discussion, we'll refer to the subjective experience we have on the inside as the mind. And I guess the physical world is the body, but I didn't say that. Do I need to say that? I guess people know what the body is. You don't have to say that. In this discussion, the subjective experience you have on the inside is the mind. So it's not just like the brain, because really, when we say the brain, we're kind of talking about the physical body. The brain is the physical organ. So the mind is the subjective experience on the inside. It's the visions you see and the sounds you hear, which are not really actually the matter that you're made of. That's the body. Okay. Does the mind emerge from the body, or has the body emerged from the mind? Or is it dualist? Do I need to say that? I mean, I'm going to explain it in detail in this chapter. I don't know if I need to say it right now in this intro, but that's something I didn't notice before. I'm talking about the mind and the body. Does the mind emerge from the body, or the other way around? On one hand, it can seem as though the physical world is fundamental because it's unrelenting. We can't break the laws of physics. On the other hand, it can seem as though conscious experience is fundamental because it's the only thing anyone has ever experienced, and we only know about the physical world through the fact that we experience it. This issue of explaining why we have mental experiences while also seemingly living in a physical world has been called the mind-body problem in philosophy. I guess I don't need to mention that there's another theory out there called, or category of theories called dualism, where mind and body are separate, so one's not emerging from the other. I feel like I should say that in this introduction paragraph. Let me just make a note to myself. Dualism, question mark? So I'll come back to that. Okay. All right, the way for us to figure this out is to begin by categorizing the possibilities. The two major opposing categories of worldviews in metaphysics are called physicalism and idealism. Physicalism is a category of worldviews, including those which define nature to fundamentally be physical, material, made of unconscious matter, or concepts similar to these. Idealism is a category of worldviews, including those which define everything to fundamentally be consciousness, experience, ideas, mind, or a concept similar to these. Okay. And then I'm defining monism, category of worldviews in which everything is fundamentally composed of only one type of entity or substance. You have dualism, category of worldviews, everything's fundamentally composed of two different types of entities. And then you got pluralism, fundamentally composed of more than two different types of entities or substances. It would make for a nice simple theory if either all of experience was reducible to physical matter or all physical matter was reducible to experience. If it's possible to form a complete theory of everything with a monistic theory, then dualistic or pluralistic ones will be shaved off with Occam's razor. Yeah, and that's actually controversial, I think. I don't know if everybody's going to agree with me on that, but I think that's very clear that I don't know how you would go around that. If you can form a complete theory of everything with a monistic theory, like everything's reducible to matter, or that even matter and everything is reducible to consciousness, then the dualist theory that says there's a realm of consciousness and a realm of physical world and they interact with each other, that would get shaved off by Occam's razor, because it's just an extra complication that's unnecessary to explain everything. Just like that example from before, if you think ice melts just because of the temperature, that's good. If you think ice melts because of the temperature and the color of the sky today, that's just all this extra stuff that's unnecessary to explain the ice melting. So you would shave that sky color thing off with Occam's razor and just say, hey, ice melts when it gets over the melting temperature. And with explaining the whole universe, it's a lot more complicated, but it's similar. If you can explain the whole universe as, everything arises from matter or everything arises from consciousness, just one single substance, that's going to be simpler than another theory that says, well, there's a world of substance and there's a world of consciousness. Material and consciousness are separate and they're interacting with each other. That would just be more complicated. So, of course, the theory has to be perfect. Though, before you can shave off dualism, you do have to have a perfect theory of the monistic view, where everything, like I'm trying to build in this book, that everything comes from experience. If I can do that, I'd like to argue that in that case, dualism gets shaved off. With the razor, Occam's razor. So, okay, I think that's true. Those of us who are used to a physicalist worldview may find it difficult to imagine how idealism could be true. Another way of thinking of it, another way to think of it is reversing the cause and effect from physicalism. Because physicalist worldviews suggest that experience is a consequence of fundamental physical entities and their behavior, while idealist worldviews suggest that physical objects are a consequence of fundamental experiential entities and their behavior. So it's just backwards, reversing cause and effect. Okay, everything in our universe is either a physical phenomenon or an experiential phenomenon that we're aware of. So naturally, the answer to the mind-body problem must fall in one of three major categories. Consciousness and physical entities both exist independently. It's basically just dualism / pluralism, idealism, and physicalism. So it's either physical, it's consciousness, or it's both. Or it's both plus more things. Okay, physicalist theories might suggest that our experiences emerge from physical entities that exist objectively and are driven by rules, such as laws of physics. Idealist theories might suggest that everything which seems physical in our world, including every atom and subatomic particle, is actually emergent from what is fundamentally a subjective experience. Dualist theories might suggest that neither is emergent and both exist independently. And pluralist theories might suggest they're both emergent from some third entity. We can see there are many variations of these ideas to solve the mind-body problem. The key is to identify what is fundamental and what is emergent. So then I define emergence, a phenomenon where something temporarily exists only as a particular arrangement or condition of something else that existed prior. Like most scientists, I think, and particle physicists and those guys will all say that the mind, the conscious mind or the brain, is emerging from the physical brain. And in my book, I'm arguing that that's backwards. The physical world and our physical bodies and everything are emerging from our conscious experience, which is actually what the universe is. Okay. What's next? See, this gets really deep into analyzing these different theories. That's why I say in the introduction that if you want, you could just skip this. If you're really interested in just seeing how I think idealism works, you would just skip to chapter 6, because that's where I start talking about it. This first chapter is just about basically analyzing these categories of theories really closely and pointing out why idealism has all these advantages. But it's complicated, and I feel like the general audience of people wouldn't care about all this. They just want to hear what I think about, how does time work and how do we define ourselves and do we have free will? That's the interesting stuff that comes later in the book. But at least I mentioned that in the introduction. I think it's important to put this stuff first. Okay, so then I made a table of dualism, physicalism, and idealism, and listing out the required assumptions for the three major metaphysical categories. Okay, that's good. So we count the assumptions. Let's begin by discussing dualism. Considering a dualistic theory to be true requires making three major unfounded assumptions. The first one is to assume our own logic and reasoning is reliable and correct. All assumption lists will include this one. Next, to explain independent consciousness, for dualism, we need to assume our consciousness exists fundamentally and is not just an emergent side effect of physical existence. Can we do that? Well, we do have very immediate evidence that we are conscious, let's put an apostrophe there. It's the fact that you're reading these words right now. What is the evidence that you're conscious? It seems to be right in your face all the time. Proving that it's definitely not a side effect or emergent property of something else might be impossible, so for now it's an unfounded assumption. Next, to explain the independent physical world, we need to assume that the physical world exists fundamentally and isn't emergent. proving that it's definitely not a side effect or emergent property of something else might be impossible. So for now, it's an unfounded assumption. So that was 3. If we found a dualist theory of everything that explained everything perfectly, it would be fundamentally based on 3 unfounded assumptions. And it seems like there's always going to be some unfounded assumptions. You're assuming that your own logic is reliable in the first place, because humans are just humans. We got these brains, but they could be making mistakes. So it might be impossible to understand the universe and build a theory of everything at all, but we can still try. You can still try to do it. You just have to have the base axiom that my logic is reliable and correct. 1 + 1 is 2. If it turns out 1 + 1 is not 2, well, then we're lost anyway. But if we want to try to understand everything, we have to have some kind of basis. We have to decide that, okay, we're going to trust our own logic. Like the laws of logic in philosophy and the scientific method and things that make sense to us, we're going to go ahead and trust that if it makes sense, then it must be true. Well, not necessarily. Not just if it makes sense, it must be true. But if we can prove something true beyond any reasonable doubt, and there's no logical reason to doubt it, then we won't doubt it. I don't know. Kind of overcomplicating it now. So anyway, dualism has 3 major unfounded assumptions. Pluralism would have 4. Physicalism would have 3. But interestingly, considering a monistic idealism theory to be true only requires making 2 major unfounded assumptions. You have to assume your logic is reliable. We need to assume that conscious experience is fundamental, and then that's it. One might think there's another assumption because we perceive a physical world. For monistic physicalism, we had to count the 3rd assumption that consciousness could be emergent from the physical world. It's true that we do need an explanation for how the physical world is 100% emergent from consciousness. However, this is not an assumption because we have an explanation, which is imagination. Just the fact that when we dream, we see physical worlds that aren't real. Conscious experience could just experience physical things, and it wouldn't have to actually be physical. We know that it's possible to consciously experience interacting with physical entities in physical worlds that aren't real, such as dreams and hallucinations. If we wanted to assume that our physical world is special and couldn't be imagined, that would be an assumption. We know consciousness has the ability to imagine physical entities and worlds, so there's no assumption being made here. We only need to assume that consciousness is somehow fundamental, and from there it can imagine everything else. This analysis is about the whole category of monistic idealism theories, so we don't need all the details of how the idealist universe works right now. If we found a monistic idealism theory of everything that explained everything perfectly, it would be fundamentally based on 2 unfounded assumptions: our logic being reliable and the idea that it's possible for consciousness to be fundamental. So basically what it is that the other theories require at least 3 to explain our world. Idealism can do it simpler. Monistic idealism theories have an inherent advantage of simplicity over dualism, pluralism, and monistic physicalism theories, since the framework of idealist metaphysics, consciousness being fundamental, requires the least unfounded assumptions of all the categories. That doesn't necessarily mean the correct answer will be monistic idealism, but it does mean that if we can form a complete theory of everything with monistic idealism theory, then the others will be shaved off with Occam's razor. God, what a long chapter. So it's necessary for me to explain this. I almost wish I could just put it at the end of the book, because not everybody's going to want to read all this. The rest of the book is really interesting. I don't know. That's the kind of dilemma that I'm considering. My first 5 chapters are like a deep dive analysis on these complicated philosophical problems. And I don't know if the average audience would even be interested in that. So hopefully, if they don't want to read all that, they'll just skip to chapter 6 and read the cool part. But should I just switch it? Should I just put chapter 6 as chapter 1 and then put this complicated stuff at the end? I don't know, because honestly, I want to be able to refer back to this stuff later on, even though I'm explaining free will or the things people are interested in. I need to be able to refer back to these reasons about how, we shaved off the other things with Occam's razor. I don't know. I think it has to be like this. I have to put the 5 technical chapters first. And I'm just going to mention that in the introduction and say, hey, red flag. If you're sick of these technical analyses, skip them. But because that's important, it's really interesting that monistic idealism has less assumptions to it. It's a simpler theory. So if it works, we can shave off the rest with Occam's razor. I don't know. For me, that was eye-opening. It made me want to consider idealism more. Before I had even thought about it, this was kind of the first thing that opened my eyes to it. So I feel like this belongs in the beginning of the book. So we're probably just going to leave it here. Okay. Chapter 3, Nature's Rules. Okay, let's think about the fundamental nature of everything in the universe. This chapter's been pretty hard to write, and I only recently have finished it. So I have a feeling this is not going to read smooth, but let's try. That's the whole point. Got to read through this as if it was a conversation and see if it reads well. Let's think about the fundamental nature of everything in the universe. Physicalist theories suggested something physical. Idealist theories suggested something experiential. Either way, we need to understand the origins of how it came to exist if we're going to form a complete theory of everything. A question that comes up often in metaphysics is, how does something come from nothing? Whether that something is physical or experiential, why does it exist at all in the first place? If we consider all possibilities, the universe may have been very different or not existed at all. So why was there a Big Bang that created a universe with stars, planets, and animals? We can begin to answer this by tracing back the causes and effects. As we've learned from physics, the behavior of each object in our universe is always a reaction to its environment in the previous moment. So the current state of the universe was caused by the previous state of the universe making a change. We can trace our history back from each moment to the previous moment until we reach the singularity before the Big Bang, but then we get stuck because we can't identify what caused the existence of that singularity. We can't travel back in time to find out, so our only approach to finding the explanation would be to understand how everything fundamentally works. If we knew the rules that govern existence at the absolute fundamental level, then we could make educated guesses about the origins of the universe. We can refer to these fundamental rules of existence as nature's rules, since they describe what occurs naturally. To explore this further, we need clear definitions of the words natural and nature. When we say things occur naturally, or events in life happen naturally, the meaning behind that word naturally is that it happens without anything causing it. For example, there are land bridges that go across rivers and valleys which were not built by animals or people, but formed by the earth on its own. We call them natural bridges. We think of nature as the world as it would be without people interfering with it. Inherent in the meaning of the word nature is the idea of being free from influence. It describes what happens in the absence of causes. So, for the broadest metaphysical sense, I'm defining natural to be that which happens given 100% total absence of influence, control, or causation. It's just what happens when there's no cause. And so I defined it that way on purpose, even though I think that's true. That is what we mean by natural. I've kind of dragged it to this extreme because nature is that which exists given no causation at all. So in the broadest sense, which we need for metaphysics, natural refers to a complete absence of causation. Since each object in our universe is actually influenced by prior events, there are no examples of truly natural objects in our universe because everything is... All right, let me just keep reading. However, things can be natural with respect to different references. For example, natural bridges are natural with respect to humans, meaning that they happen given 100% total absence of human influence, control, and causation. But natural bridges are not ultimately natural in the metaphysical sense because they were caused by prior events in the earth. It might seem like I'm just talking too much or like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but I'm not actually. Every sentence here is necessary, I think. I'm always trying to shorten it. I want to find the shortest, sweetest way to say these things. But I do need to say each thing. I need to explain that natural is going to be defined this way because that's key to understanding like the origins of the universe. Why did it start? Why was there a Big Bang? We need to realize that given that nature's rules are no rules, nature is a lack of causation. We can't just say that the Big Bang was natural. We have to actually explain why it happened. Or if we're just going to say it's naturally occurring, well, then we have to admit that. Like, it wasn't caused by the laws of physics, or it wasn't caused by this or that. It just happened, or it emerged from nothing naturally. Whatever we say, it needs to make sense. And we can't just say that the universe popped out of nowhere for no reason. There has to be an explanation, and you can't just say, well, it's natural. Because nature wouldn't choose anything. Nature is the lack of causation. Okay, I feel like that's good. In engineering, typically we don't worry about why objects follow the laws of physics because the goal of the engineer is to build a machine and achieve a practical goal. We end up looking for the rules of nature so we can understand and control objects. But for our purposes of determining a theory of everything, we aren't looking for rules. We're looking for explanation. One might think the explanation of everything would come in the form of rules or equations, but that's not necessarily true. When we're trying to understand metaphysics, we need to put our engineer's worldview on pause and make less assumptions to get closer to the truth. The laws of physics are merely observations made within the short time period of humanity's existence, so we don't know if they're permanent or temporary. When we design machines, we make the assumption that the laws of physics will continue to apply, which is fine for that application, but for metaphysical analysis, we need to remember that the laws of physics are merely observations, not fundamental rules. Okay, did I jump into that too fast? Let's see. I don't know, as I'm sitting here reading this, I do feel like I'm sort of saying the same things over and over. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. If I can cut anything out, I want to. But I don't know. When you go back and read this is the introduction paragraph, so I have to say that. If we consider all possibilities, the universe may have been very different or not existed at all. So why was there a Big Bang that created a universe with stars, planets, and animals? Let's trace back the causes and effects. Then we're talking about tracing them universe back, the history goes back to the Big Bang, but then we can't identify what caused the singularity. That's basically where we get stuck. We can't travel back in time to find out, so we just, if our only hope to understand the universe is if we can figure out the complete theory of everything and explain how it works at the fundamental level, what governs the existence. So to do that, we have to define natural and nature clearly. Okay, so then I do that. Okay, I don't think I can really cut any of that up to the definition, but what about right here? In the broadest sense, which we need for metaphysics, natural refers to a complete absence of causation. I hadn't said that before. I was just saying the meaning behind the word is that no one's causing it. Natural bridges, the world as it would be without people interfering with it. Inherent in the meaning of the word nature is the idea of being free from influence. It describes what happens in the absence of causes. Yeah. I think you don't need to say that. Let's say free from influence, control, or causation. Because that's the definition that I gave. Okay, that's good. That's better. In the broadest sense, which we need for metaphysics, natural refers to a complete absence of causation. Which I did say that before, but I'm summarizing the thing I just did. So I think that makes sense. Okay, since each object in our universe is influenced by prior events, there are no examples of truly natural objects in our universe. I do need to say that, because otherwise I'm not clarifying what I mean by that. People would say, well, you're defining natural too broadly. Nothing's going to be natural by that definition. So I want to explain that, yeah, I know that. However, things can be natural with respect to different references. So natural bridges are natural with respect to humans, but natural bridges are not ultimately natural because they were caused by prior events in the earth. Right. So by ultimately natural, I mean like metaphysically natural. So I'm not going to say ultimately, I'm going to say metaphysically. Natural bridges are not metaphysically natural. Well, we know we're talking about metaphysics. I don't necessarily want to say that. I think I should say ultimately natural because it's more about being natural in the ultimate case, in the biggest picture. Okay, no, I like that. Never mind. In engineering, typically we don't worry about why objects follow the laws of physics. So this is the first time I'm bringing up laws of physics. Do I really need to bring that up right now? Typically we don't worry about why objects follow the laws of physics because the goal of the engineer is to build a machine and achieve a practical goal. We end up looking for the rules of nature. I mean, yeah, because now the whole point is here that I'm talking about laws of physics and how they can't be natural. Because that's the main argument that exists out there, and that's what I'm arguing against. Trying to say that nature's rules are no rules, and that if there are laws of physics, they must be emergent. Because at the foundation, there has to be no rules. And I'm getting there as to why, but okay, so I do need to bring up the laws of physics now. Okay. We end up looking for the rules of nature so we can understand and control objects. But for the purposes of determining a theory of everything, we aren't looking for rules. We're looking for explanation. And I've probably said that already, but I think it's okay. Before I was talking about how you might expect the theory of everything to be a set of equations, but that's not necessarily going to be the case. It's just going to be an explanation, and I'm sort of saying the same thing here. But this is good because now I'm applying it in a different application. Now I'm talking about the laws of physics, not just the theory of everything. Now I'm talking about how we aren't just looking for laws of physics, we're looking for explanation. One might think the explanation of everything would come in the form of rules or equations, but that's not necessarily true. Hang on, let me just scroll back and see. Did I say that already? For the purposes of this, one might think that's not necessarily true. I think that would have been in the introduction, in the requirements. Because if I've already said that, I don't need to say it again. Fundamental particles. Fundamentals, realities. I did. I said, if we're searching more broadly for an answer to metaphysics without assuming that everything is fundamentally physical, then our definition of theory of everything needs to be wider and more encompassing than merely a set of master equations. I could probably skip this sentence right here. One might think the explanation of everything would come in the form of rules or equations, but that's not necessarily true. I don't need to say that sentence at all, I don't think. Because here I'm just talking about laws of physics, and I've already said that. We aren't looking for rules, we're looking for explanation. Let's take that sentence out. Boom. There we go. Editing. Progress. We're making progress. Okay. The laws of physics are merely observations made within the short time period of humanity's existence, so we don't know if they're permanent or temporary. When we design machines, we make the assumption that the laws of physics will continue to apply, which is fine for that application, but for metaphysical analysis, we need to remember that the laws of physics are merely observations, not fundamental rules. The universe isn't necessarily a place where laws of physics are enforced. All we need... See, I said it again there, so I'm glad I cut it out before. But this time it's fine, because I'm saying something slightly different. The universe isn't necessarily a place, blah, blah, blah. All we really know is that we're having experiences and observing objects behaving according to certain patterns. Right? The notion that the laws of physics drives the universe implies that the laws of physics are something that influences and controls the universe, but nature wouldn't do that. The laws of physics can't be natural by definition because they're not a total absence of influence and control. Or let's just use the exact wording from before: influence, control, and causation. They're not a total absence of influence, control, and causation. Okay. Another issue with nature's rules being the laws of physics is that there are many different sets of laws of physics that could govern a universe in theory. So a specific set of laws of physics would need to be selected from the possibilities for a given universe. That means laws of physics have a prerequisite, something to select them and enforce them. Or in other words, something to cause them. Nature doesn't have a preference for any specific setup or set of rules, so given a 100% total absence of influence, nature wouldn't select any option. Okay, since we're perceiving a specific setup, the laws of physics we observe, we need to figure out how this specific setup came to be. Our theory of everything cannot simply assert that the particular rules of physics that we observe are the master rules of the universe, because that would be incomplete. We would be left wondering why those master rules are in place as opposed to any other set of master rules. Okay, I mean, yeah, basically. Um, the phrase laws of nature is similar to square circles. Our language allows us to say the word square before the word circles, but that doesn't mean square circles exist. They involve a logical contradiction and don't exist. Similarly, we can talk about the laws of nature. We can talk about laws of nature, but nature doesn't have laws by definition. The same issue exists in the phrase natural forces. Nature is without cause by definition, so it can't cause forces. We often talk about forces of nature in conversation because we lack better answers. As we search for a theory of everything, we ought to leave these colloquial errors out of our analysis. As we search for TOE, we ought to leave these colloquial errors out of our analysis. Okay? It's clear that nature, being an absence of influence, is not a governing force and can't enforce any rules. When we talk about fundamental rules of the universe, we're talking about what happens naturally. So we can see there are no fundamental rules of the universe, because nature wouldn't choose that. Nature is the lack of choosing. So that's basically my argument overall here, is that nature has no rules by definition. Rules and forces have prerequisites which would require a cause to put them in place. The rules need something to choose the rules and something to enforce the rules. Nature can't serve as that cause, and anything we could posit to serve as that cause will have prerequisites too. If we posit that nature has rules, our TOE will be incomplete, our theory of everything. So, if we want to find a complete theory of everything, we need to assume that nature's rules are no rules, because anything else would be based on unfounded assumptions, leave open questions, and render our theory of everything incomplete. So that's how I got my first theorem. Nature's rules are no rules. Okay, I'm going to at least read the rest of this chapter. It's only one more page. Okay, it would be impossible to form a complete theory of everything if nature's rules were anything else. But this also aligns nicely with our preconceived notions of nature anyway. Nature is a lack of influence. A lack of influence is the same thing as a lack of rules, laws, governance, or enforcement. While we observe patterns that follow equations such as force equals mass times acceleration in our world, we shouldn't think of these as laws enforced by nature. We need to know exactly what causes or drives things to follow the laws of physics we observe, and the answer can be gained by suggesting the laws of physics are just natural. It doesn't help answer our question. We need to know why objects follow the laws of physics, and there's a reason why, because the laws are natural, doesn't satisfy our curiosity. It's not a legitimate answer. Exactly. And that's the common thing that people do. That's what I used to think. That's kind of what I was taught in school. We observe these patterns, force equals mass times acceleration. That's a law enforced by nature. But if you think of it that way, you're trapping yourself to not analyze the rest of the universe honestly. Because it's not true. That's an unfounded assumption to say that the laws of physics are natural. So that's the main point I'm making here, is that I gotta drive home this point. Nature doesn't have rules. The laws of physics are not natural. They're somehow emerging from something else. Something is causing them. And the thing that's causing them can't just be nature. If we say that, we have an incomplete theory of everything, because we're always going to wonder, why was it that? So that's part of what's going on here in the issue. All right, what else we got? Okay, let's consider how we might be able to form a complete theory of everything despite the fact that nature's rules are no rules, and we can't assume any laws of physics are natural. Everything would need to be explained as emerging naturally without any prerequisites. That's wordy. I could probably shorten that. Let me see. Let's consider how we might be able to form a complete theory of everything despite the fact that nature's rules are no rules. And we can't assume any laws of physics are natural. Well, to do that, everything would need to be explained as emerging naturally without any prerequisites. Right. Meaning, like, including the laws of physics. Let's consider how it might be able to... I know what to do. Nature of no rules is the first sentence. Then we can't assume any laws of physics are natural, comma, so everything would need to be explained as emerging naturally without any prerequisites. We can't assume any laws of physics are natural, so everything, including the laws of physics, would need to be explained as emerging naturally without any prerequisites. It's just that I'm using the word naturally so many times in this sentence, it almost loses its meaning. Let's consider how we might be able to form a complete theory of everything despite the fact that nature's rules are no rules. That's good. We can't assume any laws of physics are natural. I don't think you want to say laws of physics there. We really can't assume anything is natural. So I don't need to say laws of physics there. I think I could just say we can't assume anything is natural. Because natural just means a lack of causation. So anything you could think of would not be natural in the ultimate sense. Can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense. Maybe I'll say it like that. Can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense. So everything needs to be explained as emerging without any prerequisites. Not necessarily emerging naturally, I just want to say existing. Everything would need to be explained as existing without prerequisites. Okay, hang on. Everything would have to exist without any prerequisites. Okay. Maybe just say, so the entire universe would have to have no prerequisites. We can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense. So the entire universe would have to have no prerequisites. Or the existence, okay. The existence of the universe would have to have, have to have looks weird. Need to have no prerequisites. Yes, okay, this is much cleaner and smoother. I got it. Okay. Let's consider how we might be able to form a complete theory of everything despite the fact that nature's rules are no rules. We can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe would need to have no prerequisites. If the universe had any prerequisite, nature wouldn't provide it, and the universe wouldn't exist. That's what I'm trying to say. We can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe This is only if we're trying to form a complete theory of everything, but that is our goal in this book. Let's consider how we might be able to form a complete theory of everything despite the fact that nature's rules are no rules. We can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe, I want to just say it must have no prerequisites, or must not have any prerequisites. Would need to have no prerequisites? That's just the weird phrasing. I need to decide what's the best way to say that. We can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe would need to have no prerequisites. Hang on. We can't assume. So the existence of the universe must have no prerequisites. Can I say must, or do I need to say would need to have? Must have or would need to have? Well, I am talking about, let's consider how we might be able to form a complete theory of everything despite the fact that nature's rules are no rules. We can't assume anything is natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe, you can't say must, it has to be would need to have, because it's based on that other sentence. We're trying to do this. In that case, we can't assume anything's natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe would need to have no prerequisites. Yeah, in that case, it would need to have no prerequisites, because I'm talking about a specific case. Okay, that makes sense. We can't assume anything's natural in the ultimate sense, so the existence of the universe would need to have no prerequisites. That's a weird sentence, though. I'm going to highlight that. And maybe I can make that cleaner later. Sometimes I just have to walk away, go eat dinner, and come back and read it again. And then I realize, oh, because I'm looking for the short, sweet way to say everything. A lot of these, because talking about such complicated things about the nature, here's the definition of nature. And it's tough. But I got to find the smooth way to say these things so that it's fun to read. I don't want this to be so difficult to read. It needs to be short and sweet and get right to the point, explain everything clearly. That's the hard part. Because I don't know, I feel like I already know this does make sense. I can read this, and to me it makes sense. But I need to edit it until it reads smoothly, like this is a conversation I'm having with another person, It's hard to do that for certain philosophical things because it's such technical. It's like writing an Algebra 2 textbook and trying to make it friendly, trying to make it user-friendly. At some point, it's not going to be because you have to just put definitions and formulas and stuff. But that's the point. I want to make this in layman's terms and make it simple to understand and easy to read. Because anybody could just go read about idealism. It's not like I invented this. Lots of philosophers have written about this, but I'm trying to put it in terms that will be more user-friendly. And I'm trying to summarize everything. Trying to provide a nice, neat summary of idealist metaphysics. But anyway, all right, let's just finish this chapter. I'm just going to highlight that for now. Okay, in a complete theory of everything, that which fundamentally exists, whether physical or experiential, must be capable of existing on its own, without requiring anything prior to create or sustain it. Anything with prerequisites must not be fundamental, or the TUE, theory of everything, will be incomplete. That which fundamentally exists, whether it must be capable of existing on its own without requiring anything prior to create or sustain it. Anything with prerequisites must not be fundamental, or the theory of everything will be incomplete. Anything with prerequisites must not be fundamental, or the theory of everything will be incomplete. That's a weird sentence. I wish I could fix that. The first sentence is fine, I think. That's just what I said up there. Anything with prerequisites. What do you mean anything? That's what's unclear here. I'm just saying like a theory of a universe where your theory says that the universe has prerequisites. Your theory is going to be incomplete. No, okay. Actually, now that I've read it 10 times, that's right. Anything with prerequisites must not be fundamental, or the theory will be incomplete. Right. It's such a simple thing that I'm explaining here, but like, if something has prerequisites, then it can't be first in line. Like the prime mover of the universe, the first thing, the first cause, it can't be something that has prerequisites because it would need something to cause it. It's a very obvious thing. But this is just something I have to say to establish that, because that's why the next thing, any set of rules, such as laws of physics, has the prerequisite of something to initiate and maintain enforcement of the rules. If the fundamental prime mover in our theory of everything is a set of rules, then our theory of everything will be incomplete. And this is why physicalism doesn't work. A complete theory of everything can't posit that the fundamental prime mover of the universe is any set of rules, such as laws of physics. If we could rewind time to the very beginning and see how it all began, it seems there are two possibilities. Either at some point in the past something came from nothing, or there has simply always been something. The something we're talking about is our universe. Either our universe came from nothing, or it has simply always existed. Note that the definition of the universe includes literally everything, so we can't say the universe came from something else, because that something else should be grouped in and considered a part of the universe as well. So the universe either comes from nothing, or it's always been there. So then I define this term true nothing, the philosophical concept of actual pure nothing, not even infinite blackness or anything like that. The idea that there has always been something is problematic for a complete theory of everything, because it leaves open questions like what is causing it to exist, or what is preventing it from disappearing and becoming nothing. Since nature's rules are no rules, nature wouldn't cause something to always exist. Nature would be fine with nothing existing. Something always existing is basically a rule, where the rule dictates that something exists. We can't form a complete theory of everything with this idea. And why not? Why can't we form a complete theory of everything with that idea? Something always existing, because that's a rule. To say it always exists, that's the rule. But why would there be that rule? Nature wouldn't pick that rule. Nature would be fine with nothing existing, because nature's rules are no rules. So that's how my argument is working. Okay, I think it's good. This reveals that to make sense of the universe, everything must have come from true nothing naturally. If it didn't, the universe wouldn't make sense overall. The theory of everything would be incomplete. This idea works because our theory of everything won't require special setups like laws of physics that are missing an explanation. Okay, this reveals that to make sense of our universe, everything must have come from true nothing naturally. If it didn't, the universe wouldn't make sense overall because the theory of everything would be incomplete. Yeah, we just talked about all the other options. It's a process of elimination. So if you can think of something else, maybe. But out of all the options that make sense, everything must have come from true nothing naturally. If it didn't, you'd have to explain where it came from, because nature's rules are no rules. Nature wouldn't cause anything to happen. So whatever it is, it must have come naturally, or just without any cause. It must have just happened. The universe is just happening for some reason. This idea works because our theory of everything won't require a special setup like laws of physics, which is missing an explanation. So finally, our theory of everything can be complete if we can explain the universe just coming from true nothing naturally. Okay, and then I'm saying let's not jump to the conclusion that everything must have come from nothing, but let's look in this direction for potential explanations. Regardless of whether the nature of the universe is physical or experiential, its existence couldn't have been caused by nature because nature's rules are no rules. The possibility that remains is that our universe began existing due to the lack of rules in true nothing. If something came from nothing, it logically follows that the something must be naturally occurring, or it wouldn't have come from nothing. Therefore, our path to a complete theory of everything involves explaining our universe as something that has no prerequisites and is naturally occurring, given that nothing prevents it from existing. And that's the setup from these first 3 chapters. Next, we'll explore why physicalist theories can't do this. That's basically my point, is that physicalist theories cannot form a complete theory of everything. There's always going to be open questions like, why is it those laws of physics? Or why would there be a physical universe with laws of physics? It basically doesn't work, as I'll explain in more chapters, but it's interesting because idealism does work. If you go and say, well, the thing that's emerging from to nothing naturally is just experience, that's possible. Or at least that doesn't have any obvious logical problems. If you want to say the Big Bang just happened naturally and it was a physical universe, why? Why did that happen? Why would physical stuff just start shooting out? Just expand from a single physical thing? What a weird story. We'll always wonder, well, we got a theory of everything, but we sure don't know everything. We just know physics, but we don't know metaphysics. So that's the thing, is I'm not saying that makes it wrong, but I am saying that, wow, look over here, we could actually form a complete theory of everything if we went with experience as what's fundamental, because experience doesn't have prerequisites like laws of physics do. Experience is just an experience. It's just sensations. It's just feelings. It's just a dream. I think that's one of the best ways to say it, is to compare it to a dream, because life is like a dream. Like I explained earlier, it's just a collection of sensations. You can't even tell the difference between real life and a dream sometimes. And that is a huge hint that, if it was a dream, it could occur naturally. Because in a dream, everything is subjective. It's not actually there. So you don't have to explain how it got there. And your theory of everything can actually be complete. And this argument, I think, is the only way to do it. I've thought about this for thousands of hours for my entire life. And I've watched all these other philosophers talking about it. Check out Closer to Truth, or there's all kinds of people talking about this stuff. A lot of physicists are talking about it. Sean Carroll. There's those guys on Mind Chat, Philip Goff and Keith. All these people are talking about it. And you can read what philosophers in history have written about it. And after you do that, I think you'll agree with me that the idealist view is the only way to make sense of the universe. Or at least it's the only way to form a complete theory of everything that actually explains everything without leaving open questions. Physicalism always leaves open questions. And when you try to answer it, you just create another question. Oh, the laws of physics are just natural. That goes against our definition of natural. Why would there be laws of physics? That question will always be open. At some point, you're going to have to explain that atoms are following the laws of physics and subatomic particles are following the laws of physics because they're choosing to, because they have a subjective experience and they are dreaming. Now, that might sound super far-fetched, especially if you are an engineer and you've always thought of things as being physical. It's a little bit weird, but it works to form a complete theory of everything, and isn't that interesting? And then I go on for the next 14 chapters of the book to talk about free will and the nature of time, and that's where it's really fun and interesting to read. And I also talk about the definition of you, because if you're a part of a universe that's all consciousness, then you are actually just one finger of the universe. And you as a human, you feel like you're just one human, but in reality, you must be everything, because it's all one consciousness coming from the Big Bang. And that's pretty cool. That kind of changes the way you might see the world and what you care about it. Like how you see yourself and how you see ethics and how you think about treating other people, because they're you. This kind of builds a foundation for morality, because why would you want to steal from somebody else or whatever? Why would you want to do a crime if you are everyone? You actually would want to do what's right for everyone, because that's you. And I don't talk too much about that in this book. I sort of, at the last chapter, talk about ethics, but it's mainly about how it works. Okay, anyway, did I read all this? Yes, I did. I think that's it. So I feel good about these first 3 chapters. I highlighted a few things. I'm just going to work on the wording of those few things, and I'm going to call it good. And then we're going to go to chapter 4, But all right, I'm going to stop streaming for now and go maybe eat something and work on this later. All right.